will be on the scene for all things American League East as the Yankees roll into town this weekend as well. And, of course, the Ravens playing some fake football on Thursday night in New Orleans. Apparently, the message didn't come to the Saints, who apparently are going to be starting their starters in Drew Brees. And here to talk all things NFL and the perils of starting your starters, we welcome Brent Sobleski back on from Bleacher Report. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Brent Sobleski. That's Sobleski in the fighting state of Ohio. Brent, what's going on? Happy summer to you, man.
Hey, Nestor. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Well, I know you've written about Tony Romo a little this week, and John Harbaugh made some news here after the game, and Ben Watson's injury here certainly, sort of dark news for Ravens fans over the weekend. But, this is not a dirty little secret that the coaches don't really like most of these games, that it's a cash grab, and it doesn't change until Jerry Jones gets pissed off about it, right?
It seems like that's the case because anytime there's been a big argument at the highest points of the NFL, Jerry Jones is the mediator when it comes to that. We saw how much pull he had when it came to this Los Angeles situation with the Rams. They're now in the City of Angels thanks to Jerry Jones. So it just gives you an idea the type of pull he has overall. But I'm going to be honest, Nestor, when we look at this, and I understand why Coach Harbaugh would be upset after losing Benjamin Watson, but what could they have prevented from that injury from occurring? That was a non-contact injury. All he did was fire off the ball and his knee blew. That could have happened in practice. That could have happened in scrimmage. There's multiple cases around the league. Brandon Oliver, Mike Jenkins, same night, both had similar injuries to Watson, non-contact injuries. So we can complain about preseason football all day long, but that's not the issue. The issue runs far deeper in how these teams are not preparing in the NFL, the lack of overall practice time, the lack of physicality in practice, no more two-a-days, not getting your body accustomed to playing the sport of football and the physicality that accompanies it. That is an NFLPA issue. That is a contract dispute issue. That's something that's going to come up and be a big part of the next negotiation, would be 2020. So we can stand back and say preseason, why do we have it? There's no point. Well, it's not necessarily these games that are causing these situations. It's the way the approach coming into this and the way the players tried to protect themselves and yet ironically cut themselves off at the knees.
Well, there are 4 games, and if let's be honest, if all the starters played all 4 games, there'd be a hell of a lot more injuries than there already are, and especially this 4th game, right? I mean, this is the game where there's no way Harbaugh wants to send Flacco out on the field. And I know the Saints apparently are going to start Drew Brees just because their offense has been that bad. But I think most of the coaches would cancel this 4th preseason game, cut up their teams and take their chances on the guys and say, I'd rather not play this game. Certainly the fans would rather not attend this game. But until the owners decide and the Players Association decide, well, let's go to 18 real games. Let's make some more money, which it appears as though the Players Association would never want any part of that. I don't know what they're going to do to alleviate that because coaches are going to have to play in these games. They're just going to choose to not play Steve Smith or Terrell Suggs or Joe Flacco in most of any of these games, quite frankly, which is one of the things that really makes it a ripoff for the fans.
Well, absolutely, especially when the NFL teams are charging full price for these games. Those you hit on the 2 major issues here, Nestor. 1, the owners and the money that accompanies these games, and 2, the NFLPA. So while we don't get to see Joe Flacco, for example, in the final game, and that's all right because what these games actually mean right now, especially the 4th preseason contest, is the guys on the bottom of the roster, number 75 to number 53, and those people competing for open roster spots, trying to keep their dream alive to stay professional football players. This is where the game's important. I know we all want to see the stars and we want to see great play and good, clean, crisp football. But you have to be able to build your roster. You have to be able to give those guys opportunities to play, to prove themselves, and maybe potentially flash to make a roster. That's where the NFLPA comes in. They want to protect the rights not only of the $100 million quarterback, but the 53rd man on the roster as well. So that's why when it comes to the NFL preseason, I hardly ever find it possible that they'll move on from the format as we currently know it because the NFL might have been pushing for 18 games, but it's almost impossible to reconcile their attempts to prove that they're far more safe today by adding 2 more regular season games. So they're hitting a bit of a wall, and overall they still want to have the same amount of games and make the money. The NFLPA wants the players out there, but there's not much you can do to really change the situation.
Well, the PA is pretty much over our dead bodies, right? Like, I mean, it feels like it's a non-starter from a conversational standpoint, that it's not really about, well, how much money are we talking about here for 2 extra games? It's more like we don't even want to talk about that.
Well, and they have the right to do so because, there's very little leverage they have. Let's face it, the NFLPA is arguably, it's not even arguably, it's the weakest players union of all the 4 major sports. And when you look at what they have in leverage-wise, it's very little. They make less overall money, and percentage-wise, they don't have the ability to really stand up to the owners. The NFL is an owners' league. It's not a players' league. So when they have an opportunity like this to really stand up for the players, this is the type of leverage they have. And they have a lot coming into this next negotiation. I know this is literally years ahead of time, but all these things are coming to a head, it seems like, right now, to where we have to start looking towards those things, to what the NFLPA can do.
Well, there's never been more bad blood. I'll say that, right? I mean, and we came very close to having a stoppage situation a couple of years ago. It's only gotten worse, and certainly more vitriolic and personal, whether it's D. Smith and Goodell, or Goodell and his own ownership guys, or certainly everything that falls out of the Tom Brady and the Deflategate tree. They don't like each other. It's almost as bad as baseball used to be, right?
Well, I agree. And when you look at what Ramon Foster said from the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe a week or 2 ago, he's already he's a representative for the Steelers, for the players' organization. He's already telling them to prepare for a lockout. And quite frankly, it seems like it's steamrolling right to that point because it's not just about money anymore. It's not just about player safety. We're talking about practice schedules. We're talking about Roger Goodell and how much power he wields in the suspension process and appeals. It's multiple issue after multiple issue that extended beyond the money. Unfortunately, all they concentrated on the last round of negotiations was the money. So now it's time to deal with all the little things that are now coming up that kind of fell through the cracks.
Like jurisprudence and who gets to be the judge, the hanging judge, and the jury, right?
Well, absolutely. Players aren't happy with the situation. There's no set rules to exactly who's suspended, why they're suspended, how long they're suspended. You also have the drug policy needs completely redone. We look at Lane Johnson in Philadelphia, for example, believing he took something that was legal according to the NFLPA. They basically didn't back him, and then so he's still trying to appeal his 10-game suspension. These are players being hung out to dry, essentially, and because they're in a situation where they feel they're not getting the support and they don't know exactly what the rules are when they need to approach them or how to work and help their bodies, for example, in Lane Johnson's case. So it's just a giant cluster right now, and it's going to be something that's going to all come to a head in a few years from now.
He is Brent Sobleski. He covers all things NFL for Bleacher Report. You can follow his journey out on Twitter as well at Brent Sobleski. That's Sobleski. All right, so where does this leave the Cowboys now? I know you wrote about Dak Prescott. Everybody is. We're playing the Saints this week, and here's Drew Brees. It's going to quarterback a 4-12 team this year, and the Broncos could use a quarterback. There are teams out there sort of built to win if they had a quarterback. We would have said that about the Ravens for a bunch of years here during the Billick era as well. But the Cowboys are the one team now that they have a different sheriff in town now, and certainly a large set of expectations there, and a very winnable division if they had a serviceable quarterback.
Well, I look at Dallas as being a prime and perfect example of a young quarterback coming in with the potential to succeed. And the reason I say such, anytime you supplant a veteran starter, people are disappointed. And I understand it. Tony Romo's proven, but he's also been a mass unit for the last few years. So you still have the best offensive line football. You have 3 starting caliber running backs. You have Des Bryant, healthy. You have Jason Witten, healthy. You have Terrence Williams, healthy. Now you just plop that starting quarterback in there, that rookie who's outplayed any other rookie quarterback in the league, and that includes all 3 of the first-round picks. If anyone took a step back, they would think Prescott had been the number 1 overall pick and not Jared Goff, the way those two have played in this preseason. You put him in there, I can see a very similar situation to what I'm comparing to a Russell Wilson or a Ben Roethlisberger. You can develop those guys because you have everything around them to continue to win while they're starting. And I think that's optimal for Dallas, because if he continues to play well, you can essentially Wally Pip Tony Romo or a newer nomenclature here of Drew Bledsoe, essentially, what we saw with his career with Tom Brady, and just continue to bring the young guy along and eventually get out from under that albatross of a contract that Tony Romo has. Even if you look at it purely from a financial perspective, if they can move on from Tony Romo after this season, they'll save over $5 million next year on next year's salary cap. So it's in their best interest, quite frankly, to see what this young kid has early in the season. I think they're still good enough to compete in that division because there's a little bit of uncertainty and no dominant team.
Well, Brent, because you live sort of halfway between Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, and you definitely speak with a distinctive Pittsburgh accent, I must tell you, or maybe the Youngstown that Bruce Springsteen sings about. Either way, we here in Baltimore rarely talk about the Cleveland Browns, right? I mean, maybe the Cleveland Cavaliers, certainly the Cleveland Indians right now, and I prefer to stay away from Pittsburgh and Cincinnati till we have to play them. But the Paul Kruger tweet, has a Baltimore-Cleveland thing going on, and as much as we're going to see Donnell Ellerbe this week, we've seen many players leave the Ray Lewis tribe and go elsewhere, and really, from Bart Scott through Adalys Thomas back to, we go through all, including Ed Hartwell, who's now famous for a divorce. The Kruger tweet was kind of interesting and telling, and I guess he'll play in the league, right? And, there was also, the Ravens need a pass rusher, maybe they would call him. But it was a kind of a fascinating anti-Cleveland tweet.
Well, first of all, straight Appalachian foothills. That's where I come from. So I don't use yins. I stick away from the yins, but you'll get an ain't or a crick out of me every now and again.
I'm sure you've eaten a Permani or two as well, so,
I have, so I can't argue that whatsoever. With Kruger, it's a story not necessarily looking organization, but what the Browns are currently doing. First of all, there's two ways to look at that. First, if he said mishandle, which he grossly misspelled, and anyone can laugh about that to an extent, but how he was handled throughout as a player, consistently being asked to drop in space instead of being a pass rusher, he felt he was misused. Furthermore, this isn't the first misstep, as it were, for the Cleveland organization. I've talked to agents, for example, who weren't happy with the way they approached free agency, their attitude, their overall approach, pulling potential contract offers. So right now, they're trying to establish themselves with a brand new front office with Hugh Jackson as coach. And I think a lot of people respect all the people involved, but there's been bumps along the way, and that's to be expected to a degree simply because the Saucy Browns, a brand new general manager, has never been in that position for. You have Paul DePodesta, who's a baseball guy, so they're kind of finding their way a little bit, even though you have that veteran coaching staff to really give you a little bit of a buffer. With that said, Paul Kruger is not going to be out of work very long today. He's in New Orleans with the Saints to potentially sign there. If he doesn't, he has another visit lined up tomorrow. So he's one of those guys that can play in this league. And let's take...
And the Browns need guys that can play in this league because, quite frankly, they haven't had enough of them.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, Nestor. Like, Paul Kruger is a fine football player, but he's not a $7.7 million football player like he would have been paid this year under the salary cap. He's a good football player, had 11 sacks in 2014, but he really disappointed last year. And when you're not living up to your contractual value, teams tend to dump you along the way. So
sure.
And you can't blame him for that.
Or renegotiate with you, which is what he's going to have to do in the open market now, right?
Correct, and you should be upset when you're bound to make $4 to $5 million less than what you were going to because your team releases you, and that's another question mark at times. What Cleveland has done is it's different than a lot of other organizations. Carlos Dansby, Dante Whitner, now Paul Kruger. They're essentially releasing these guys just out of nowhere. And I know that sounds weird, but there's general practices that a lot of teams, when they want to release a guy, when they're given time to sign with another team, and they've kind of come out of the blue and just released veterans that still feel they can play in the league. So that adds into the perception that they're not approaching everything the NFL way or the normal way of business operation.
Well, they're Cleveland, for crying out loud. I mean, they hired baseball people and a bunch of bean counters to run the plays. They don't know what the hell they're doing there, which is why we love playing them in week 2, quite frankly. He is Brent Sobleski. You can follow him out on Bleacher Report as well. All right, Brent, give me one team you're watching right now here that you're in love with leading into the season. One team that's going to make the playoffs this year that traditionally doesn't make the playoffs.
Well, you said that what team I love, and the first team that popped in my head, even though they made the playoffs last year, is the Minnesota Vikings.
Fair enough.
To me, I love the way they're progressing. You have Teddy Bridgewater, who I'm still a believer in. I think he can take the next step once you've added talent around him with Stephon Diggs last year, Laquan Treadwell this year, a fully healthy Adrian Peterson, and a bigger and more physical offensive line. Plus, Mike Zimmer does a great job on the defensive side of the ball. We saw that in the AFC North with the Cincinnati Bengals for years. I actually have them as my NFC pick for the Super Bowl. So that's when.
Well, you make the quarterback better the minute you put him inside on a carpet, right? I mean, just from an accuracy standpoint, just from the arm strength, everything that represents him, he's going to be a better quarterback in that dome.
Well, he should be. And first of all, that is a beautiful stadium. I don't know who got to see the first preseason game in U.S. Bank Stadium. It's just a beautiful outlay in the way that they'll be play football. But you're absolutely right. With Teddy Bridgewater, he's never been known as that traditional big burly, winner quarterback. He's 6'2", 215-ish pounds, and never had the biggest arm. That was the question mark. So you put him in there, you put talent around him. He can work within the scheme and be effective, and that's all you need when you play good defense and you have Adrian Peterson.
He's also a guy that's gotten better at every step, and I always love to see that. I mean, I felt that way about Joe Flacco. I feel like every year Joe's been a little better, a little smarter, a little less likely to do something, bad for the team, whatever it is. Put himself in a bad spot, dirt the ball, throw a pick, throw it to throw it into triple coverage, misread things, getting guys lined up. All of that gets better if you're a quarterback, which is why we see so many guys thrive in a backup position. Once they become 30 or 31, the light can go on and they can go out there and actually do it. I think it's. I'm with you. I think the Vikings are going to be a good team. I'm hearing a lot about Jacksonville and Oakland. Those are the two sexy teams on the AFC side. I know that would mean somebody else has to get out of the way, but I think there's plenty of reason to believe the Broncos won't be as good this year, that the Jets wouldn't be any good this year, that no one's coming to get some of these teams, especially the Colts don't look nearly as formidable this year as well, so I think that opens the door in both of those divisions for someone else.
Agreed. And when you look at, to your previous point, Nestor, about young quarterbacks developing, what do Jacksonville and Oakland have? Young quarterbacks that are developing. Derek Carr, Blake Bortles were fantastic at points last year. A lot of people don't realize that Blake Bortles tied for second in the NFL last year in touchdown passes. Derek Carr, if you watched him this preseason, he's dropping dimes all over the place. His arm talent is as good as any quarterback in the NFL, and they have talent around them, more importantly. When you look at Jacksonville, for example, the Allens brothers, Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns are the best young pair of wide receivers in the NFL. TJ Yeldon, 23 years old. You add Chris Ivory, a power runner, short for around the end zone and short yardage situations. Then you infuse it with free agency talent. And this is what both of those rosters did this past offseason. And Jacksonville, Malik Jackson, Prince Amukamara, Tayshaun Gibson, you're getting the pieces in place to at least be average defensively instead of on the bottom half of the league. And Oakland, Bruce Irving to go along with Khalil Mack, Reggie Nelson, Sean Smith. These are guys that are good, proven, solid veterans that you add around those franchise pieces that you've drafted the last 2 or 3 years. And you can see the continual growth between both of those programs. And I agree. I think both of them should be challenging for a playoff spot this year.
He is Brent Sobleski. He has great cartoons on his Twitter, and you can follow him at Brent Sobleski, Sobleski. He's an NFL analyst at Bleacher Report, mixing cartoons and humor with his football out there. And oh, how I hate Ohio. Man, we got Big Ten play going on with the Terps in Ohio State. We got all sorts of Maryland, Ohio issues happening here over the next 4 months. It's great having you on, Brent. We'll be following you out at Bleacher Report as well as on Twitter, man.
Well, thank you for having me, Nestor. It's always my pleasure.
You got it. Brent Sobleski out at Bleacher Report. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear from wherever you are. The morning newspaper, it's your email inbox at 7 a.m. That is chock full of headlines, box scores, standings, all the traditional good stuff that you want to read to begin your day. 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness. The tech service, that's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is our best service. About 10,000 of you on it now. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You get the news first, no questions asked, never any spam. You'll be the smartest sports fan in your circle if you're on the WNST text service. Last but not least, nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook Live, YouTube, and our WNS TV channel, as well as Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn. And from Germany to you, we're going to be over in Germany the next couple of days. Make sure you're following along on Facebook and on our social media. We'll have some great stories. My wife's going to meet the guy who saved her life twice. So it's going to be a pretty cool couple of days here as we head to Deutschland for beer and schnitzel and spätzle and strudel and whatever else they'll feed me, I'm willing to eat, including Frankfurters in Frankfurt. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.